Hi, everybody. We have with us Kaylee Anello, who is in Portland, and she is a professional human design consultant and is also studying homeopathy as well, which is cool because I'm sure they merged together, and we will learn about that today because I don't know a ton about it. I know that human design has really gotten more and more popular, but tell us more, Kaylee, about yourself and your background in human design.
Yeah, so my story begins in the Midwest. I was raised an hour outside of Chicago. And when I was 20, just turned 20, when I was in college, I kind of got like thrown into the world of natural health on accident. So it was one of those cases where it was totally divine. And I ended up meeting a holistic healer in Chicago who helped me to initially just heal an injury I had gotten. And he kind of introduced me to the world of herbal medicine, homeopathy, astrology. Like I remember the first day I went into his office, he asked me for my birth time. And I was like, just not familiar at all outside of horoscopes. And, I knew I was a Pisces, for example. And he actually gave me cell salts based on my astrology. So he gave me Ferrum Phos, which rules Pisces. And it really helped me to regulate iron and a bunch of other things. And that was my introduction.
Do you know what type of profession that he kind of put himself out as and where he picked that up from? Because there was a period of time I know that Robin Murphy was teaching that.
Yes, it was from Robin Murphy, actually. He was friends with him. And so him and his wife are both friends with Robin Murphy. And there's also called the Salts of Our Salvation. It's like a little mini booklet that tells you more about cell salts and astrology and how they tie in. Right. So that's another good resource for that. So yeah, I highly recommend it. It's really cool. And so that was kind of my introduction into astrology, or like divination systems, was through him when I was 20. And it kind of was just one of those things. Homeopathy felt like this too, where it was just like coming home. And I just knew it on some level deep within. It felt very familiar to me. And so human design is really just a type of astrology. It's kind of how I like to describe it in simple terms. It does combine other divination systems in it, which I think really sets it apart. So there's a little bit of quantum physics. There's the Chinese I Ching in there. There's the chakra system. And then the body graph is modeled after the tree of life in Kabbalah. So all of these amazing ancient systems combined into one using your birth time. And it tells you so much about how you operate in the world. And so I stumbled on human design, I think it was almost 4 years ago now. And it was very similar where I looked at a body graph and I just immediately resonated with it. And it was definitely my way of really tiptoeing into self-exploration that I think is such an essential part of healing. And it was definitely an essential part of mine, because I had been a few years into my own healing journey at that point. So I just love human design. I think it's such a useful tool that can be used really in any sort of healing modality. It can be used to understand your clients better, to understand yourself better. And we can get into more about like the 101 intro on types and stuff like that if you want to as well. But that's kind of my introduction. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm interested in like how human design was developed. Like it has its origins. So it started from astrology, but who created it and what was the inspiration?
So essentially it was channeled by somebody named Robert Krakauer, who is now known as Ra-Uru-Hu. And so what's interesting about it is it was channeled by him, but it turns out that he wasn't the only one that had channeled the very same information. He was just the one that actually put it out there into the world.
Mm-hmm.
So this was in the 80s, so it's not a very old system. And so he essentially had a spiritual experience and downloaded the information and kind of was shown how to put these systems together in a way that can be really useful, practical, and tangible.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you start with the birth information, same like with astrology. How does it branch off from like standard Western astrology?
Yeah, so there's actually astrology embedded as part of the system. Where it differs is that I like to say it's like astrology gives you a lot of kind of heady information about yourself, your personality, maybe why you came here. And then human design really helps you to embody that information. It's such a useful tool to actually feeling into your body, into what your unique intuition feels like, what the source of that intuition is. So it helps you to use it on a body level in your day-to-day life. And the other way that it differs, and I think you'll see more so how it differs when I show you the body graph too. But it also uses the time 88 days before your birth, and it calculates that into the chart because they say that that's when the soul came into the body. Mm-hmm. So it has like 2 reference points.
88 days. So what is that? Like 3 months?
About 3 months.
You're about 6 months pregnant, the soul enters or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you said something there that piqued my interest, which is like being able to source where your intuition comes from.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So in human design, we call it your inner authority. And so based on your type, so there are 5 types, you'll have a different authority that you can tune into for your intuition. So for most people, that comes from the sacral or the gut response. And so, 70% of people are either generator types or manifesting generator types, which is just a hybrid. And their intuition is going to be felt as a gut response. Whereas projector types, they will feel into their spleen a lot of times. They'll have a splenic, like intuitive hit that can feel like kind of like a 6th spidey sense where it just like tingles in your body. And it's kind of just this rush of knowing. And then there's the emotional center in human design that you have to factor in because if you're feeling on a super high wave, like you're on an emotional high, everything's right and beautiful, or if you're feeling super low, down in the dumps, depressed, distraught, that can kind of cloud your intuition a little bit. And so in those times, usually we advise that you kind of wait for more of a neutral place and then feel into it. So there's so many things in your chart that designate how your intuition is going to speak to you. Mm-hmm. And then not only that, but kind of the pitfalls of where, you know, your mind can kind of take over and make the decision for you without maybe you even being aware of it or realizing it. So in human design, we call that kind of like the not self or the lower expression of that energy that can kind of hijack our intuition if we're not aware of it.
Right. I feel like I need to look at a chart. I know you have.
Yeah, let me pull up the slides. Let's see if I can do this. I'm not seeing where I can share that, unfortunately.
You go down below to share screen and then click on
that. Here it is. Here it is. Okay. So start it.
And this is your website?
Oh, this is just my little presentation I made on Canva.
theripenedheart.com.
Yes, that's my website. I'm at the Ripened Heart.
Well, it can just that word, the ripened heart. What is that? What does that feel? I mean, that's a wonderful.
So honestly, when I was starting my website, which was even before I did human design, it was a name that just kind of came to me in meditation and I loved it. Mm-hmm. That's the honest origin story, is it just dropped in out of nowhere. But for me, it's like really developing who you are and really coming into yourself. And the journey and process of that is how I've come to understand it. Ironically enough, I also have the heart center defined in my human design chart. So I knew that afterward, which is kind of funny.
Wonderful.
But yeah, so this is my little introduction here. So this is what a body graph looks like. And so you can see it kind of looks like the chakra system, right? There's actually 9 centers though. So that's where it's going to branch off from the traditional 7. So there's the head center right here. We have the ajna. We have the throat. This is called the identity center. So that's a new one. We have the heart center. Then we have the solar plexus. That's where the emotions lie. We have the sacral here. Then we have the root center. And then this is the spleen. So that's the other extra one that branches off.
Okay.
And so it's a really, really, once you get down to it, essentially what you're looking for is like, okay, so the centers here that I'm seeing in my chart, they're what determine my energy type. And anything that's colored in, doesn't matter what color it is, that's what's called a defined center. So that's really energy that's very consistent for you. And it's where also your authority or your intuition and how that speaks is coming from too. And so where you have white centers, which are all of these that you see in this chart, those are really receivers of energy. So it's where you're taking in energy from your environment, from transits, from the people around you. And it's also where you can have some conditioning come in from upbringing or just society in general. And so usually that's the first thing that I like people to focus on is, okay, where is your authority? So what's your intuition? How do you make decisions? And then where are you open? Because that's really what you came here in this life to learn about and the energy that you really came here to master and be aware of.
Wow. So, that's very expanded. So, where your authority comes from can come from, you already touched on all those kind of various systems, but do they correlate with the beige ones here?
Yeah, so in this chart, and I'll get into the types in later slides, but let's just look at this chart. So this would be a chart of a projector, because I know that because this center is open. So that automatically means that they're not a generator and they're not a manifesting generator, which I mentioned is most types where they have the gut as their intuition. But here, it's coming from the spleen, which I had mentioned. So it's the spleen right here, but then also the emotional center right here. And so that is where that's coming from here. And it's kind of like the centers work in sort of a hierarchy. And that's why one of them will be your authority or your intuition, because some of the centers are louder than others. So we know, that when we're emotional, there's really no denying it. If we're in tune with our emotions, they eventually bubble to the surface, whether we like it or not. So the emotions are always going to be like the loudest energy in our bodies.
Right.
And then the next loudest one would be the gut or the sacral, where it's like what that feels like in the body for somebody who has that defined is it will feel like a contraction towards something. It's like when you're doing the body pendulum, it's like when your body moves away. That's the no for the sacral. Right. Whereas if it's a yes, you're magnetized toward it, you're pulled towards it. It actually gives you more life force energy to say yes to that thing. And right. That's why it lights you up, because it's meant for you.
This is so fascinating, because you did say this is like a more embodied astrology. It's taking what your astrological imprint is and really applying it to your organ systems and how they interrelate and what patterning that gives you, what your greatest capacities and your greatest weaknesses are. And so you're able to really understand that a lot better. That's amazing. keep going.
Yeah, I'll keep going. There's so much to it.
Yeah.
And so, let's just look at this chart still. And say I had a client come to me for homeopathy. And, I always ask, is it okay if I look at your chart? A lot of people who come to me are very into this. So they're like, yes, let's do it. Let's combine them. And so I would notice, okay, so this person is going to have trouble with boundaries, especially around work. So they're going to have more of a tendency towards burnout because they don't have that sacral energy that's consistently in the 9 to 5, go, go, go. Like people that don't have that defined are really not so built for the 9 to 5 world. Right. And they have to be a lot more strategic with their energy because they're actually here to help lead and guide others and help to guide other people's energy. So they make great like readers or consultants, right, or therapists or things like that. So I know that this client,
because they're more receptive.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yes. They see the bigger picture because they're meant to be less in the grind. They're able to it's kind of like a bird, they're perched on the branch overseeing.
That would be a really cool way to apply the different animal types, because I could see that the reptile remedies would be the generators,
Yeah,
way more in their sacral energy.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, interesting.
Or even like a cheetah, or some of the animals that just have all that go, go, go. But also those remedies can be incredibly healing for somebody who's burnt out and have like gone into an energy deficit with their sacral. So I know there's going to be probably issues around work for this client. I also see that their root is open here. And so that's really the center of, it's where the adrenals are in human design. It's adrenalized stress energy. Somebody with this center open, they're going to be taking on the stress of other people. So let's say they're at work. Their boss comes in and gives them a deadline. You need to do all these things, but before the end of the day. And they're like, there is no way that I'm going to be able to get all of this done. And so let's say this boss had their sacral colored in, their root colored in, they're taking in that stress, and then they're actually amplifying it and feeling it even more. And then they're all stressed out. And so this can be another source of burnout where they aren't able to leave their work at work. They feel like they have to do every single thing on their to-do list, because actually the people who have these centers defined are better at saying no and knowing when enough is enough for them. And so, yeah, that's likely going to be a problem, is stress and not being able to wind down at night and relax.
Right.
So I'm just kind of giving you like a kind of integrated overview of some centers with a practical example. I hope this is helpful.
Yeah. What are all the numbers?
The numbers are what corresponds to the I Ching. So there's 64 gates in the Chinese I Ching, which is a great book to have. And they're really universal life lessons, but they also tell you how the energy in a center is being expressed. And so we know, like, when there's something that has a lot of numbers lit up in a center, like this person is going to be super focused on identity. Their life trajectory will be very important to them. Where they live and work, they will have a very defined sense of self. It's more like a fixed energy. And same with this, like, it's like this connected here, the heart to the solar plexus here. This is what's called the channel of community. So there's going to be a lot of themes around family and community. And that's going to be a focus in their life, is developing their tribe, or who feels important to them and who resonates with them. So that's kind of like extra detail.
Does that also correlate just with the houses on a standard astrological chart, where you'd have like just more planets, piled in your like 11th house? So you would have maybe.
Yeah. So I find that what's interesting about human design is it's not like a direct, this is the 11th house or something like that. but the gates are ruled by planets. So there's a different view of the chart that you can have where it's like, oh, they have a lot of gates or life themes in Pisces. They have a lot in Aries or something like that. And a lot of times it will just describe somebody in slightly different language. So you'll see an overlap in theme, certainly.
Right. Right.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say about this chart is that this person would likely have issues with communication since the throat is open. And also they will have trouble with potentially things like headaches because this is open and it creates pressure when there's all this information crammed in there. Maybe they feel pressure to be super analytical and figure out their client's remedy, and they're thinking about the remedy, think, oh my God, now I have a headache, you know? Yeah. So yeah. Should we get into a little bit more about the types, or did you have any other questions coming up for me?
Oh my gosh, there's a myriad of questions.
I know.
Yes.
It's a Pandora's box.
It is a Pandora's box, but I'm just curious, like in finding somebody's type, what that helps that person then kind of find how best to use their energy type, how best to kind of be who they are. But can that change? I mean, is this a really fixed thing? Like, and is this kind of limiting as such, like overly attached to our identity as like, okay, so this is what I hear is like, well, I'm a projector, so da 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 da, that's what I hear in my environment. I don't know a lot of about human design, but I'm just wondering if that can be a limitation for people.
I love that question so much. It's something that I have really thought about and written about before. And something that I like to say is, we put ourselves in a box a lot of times. So that's just kind of how humans are. So it's like, don't use human design as another limitation or another box to define yourself as. If there's anything in your chart that doesn't make you feel freer, lighter, more embodied, throw it out.
Yeah, it's my issue with homeopathy too, where people identify themselves as like, well, I'm a sulfur, so therefore I can be messy, and it's like the idea is to
self-fulfilling prophecy too.
Yeah, exactly. Is to kind of figure things out so you can kind of have more freedom to be beyond that piece of identity in a way.
Yeah, I exactly. I find that the people who tend to do that with human design only have a very basic understanding of type, and they because there are things like in the astrological chart that tend to conflict. So, it's like, oh, well, I'm a projector, so I'm not here to work and I'm not going to pursue that. It's like, but then there can be other aspects of their chart that's like, actually, you're literally here to do this. I'm thinking of a channel that's called the Design of a Transmitter, where they would be really good at translating really difficult concepts into everyday language that people can understand. And so they're here. Everybody has a contribution that they're here to make. And I've found that through exploring my own chart, it's really just given me permission and understanding to be more of myself. And especially when it goes against societal expectations or ways that I wanted to mold or change myself to fit into something. And
exactly.
Yeah.
So I've always felt like I needed to be able to run a marathon, but I just don't feel like I can.
Yeah. And it's beautiful. These are really just archetypes. The energy types are archetypes. And there's so much more to your chart than just that. And also the other way I think that human design kind of has an inbuilt mechanism to kind of check that is half of the chart is unconscious. And so that's where your the time that was imprinted when your soul came into the body, all of that stuff is unconscious and has to be like grown into. Right. And when I tell somebody about that part of their chart, they're often they don't identify with it. And it's something that they don't see in themselves, or that they project onto other people as like, well, I'm not emotional. My partner's emotional. Now she's emotional. You know what I mean? So
right.
it's
All of those subconscious patterns get kind of,
yeah. So I think it's so interesting to be able to see that in a chart of like, oh gosh, that's an area that I need to really contemplate
right.
and be conscious of. But yeah, I love that question. I think anything can be used that way if it's all about intention, right?
Yeah, exactly. And that could be the tagline of our classes. It's all about intention anyways. um
Exactly.
so could you, I have so many questions. Could you also like look and you can see these weaknesses and that could help you? Like how would that help you with homeopathic prescribing, for example? Like how would you look at this and study homeopathy and find those overlaps?
So the first thing that I really integrated was from, first learn your own chart, even if it's just the basics, because, especially if you're a practitioner, you can understand how you're impacting your client. And so that's something that I'm like, okay, so if I have a center defined, I'm putting out that energy into the space that when I'm working with somebody. And if they have that center open, they're picking up on it and amplifying that energy. So that's the first thing. How am I impacting other people? What do I have defined? What am I putting out there into the world without me having any control over it,
Right.
So how am I conditioning that patient? That's the first thing.
Right. And we're
Temporarily.
doing that all the time just by virtue of being in our bodies, human existing. Like you can't, they always talk about the objective observer, and it's just pretty much impossible to kind of remove and create this kind of neutral environment because there's just emerging constantly.
Yeah.
Energy
Exactly.
and projecting and yeah.
Yeah, so you can see where you're temporarily, conditioning your client. And then on the flip side, you can look at your client's chart and see, maybe where they're impacting you. So you can kind of see what energy centers, because a lot of times, it's really uncanny and kind of insane. The people that I attract to work with will have opposing energy centers. So I'll have, my throat defined, theirs will be open. Right. My emotions are defined, their emotions are open, and vice versa. So you tend to attract, that's why people tend to be an energetic match for you, is because everybody's kind of looking for definition. Ideally, a human wants everything defined. They want to have access to all of it, right? They want to have access to all of it all the time. And so we tend to attract people who have opposite definition as us. And so that means that you can use your open centers to really pull in the other.
And those are great partners, right? Because you're able to kind of then balance each other out.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And what I found most interesting is in my own chart, I have my identity center completely open besides like one gate, which is actually called the gate of the listener, which is like a gate that attracts people's secrets and stories.
Oh.
So it's like, but the thing is that, this openness can also get you into trouble. So what I found is that I'll take the patient on too long, and I'll have to be aware of that, because I can literally like feel into the person and their story and really feel it at a body level. And that helps me when I'm choosing a remedy for them, definitely. And so I'll kind of lean into where I'm open and where I can take them in temporarily, and then, leave it there and clear it after.
Amazing. Do you, this kind of diagram that you have, do you have that in your mind's eye when you're working with a client? Like you're thinking about their open and closed energy centers and how things are operating?
I did at first, and now it's just kind of like an automatic thing that I can kind of feel definition at this point from people's story, from how they're talking to me, and I can kind of just pick up on it and just notice it, but then let it go. Cause, at the end of the day, I'm always trying to be open. And what I was careful about in using human design is that I don't want it to cloud the remedy, right? So I don't want to have preconceived notion, but I also find it so helpful, if you're choosing between remedies, to go back and look at their chart and to be aware of it. And you just notice that there's definitely the things that they talk about usually fit into themes of the centers.
Right.
And then you can kind of be like, it's kind of like how you were saying where, you like to have the materia medica, and then, you like to have that kind of database that you've read through so many times. And then you can kind of check your intuition against it or use it in tandem.
Right.
So it's
Absolutely.
like, oh, why was I feeling that there was, such an identity issue, say, like I felt third row. Oh, their identity center's open. That kind of like confirms it too,
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right. I feel like there can be just so many correlations. What is it that drew you to homeopathy, having practiced this for so long? What is it that homeopathy provides as a complementary therapy for this?
Yeah. So at first they were kind of separate worlds to me because I had found homeopathy before human design. Because I had found, like, when I was 20, astrology came into my life and homeopathy. And then I had just used it, as a patient, and it had just worked better for me than anything else. And so I realized, through my chart, through my astrology, through my human design, I am somebody who works really well with energy medicine. I just have a lot of receptivity in that way. And so then I kind of, put homeopathy over there for a minute and started doing human design readings. And I just noticed that homeopathy can really help where people are stuck in their chart, because a lot of people are coming to me. A lot of people come to me when they're at a crossroads in their life. So they have to make a big decision. Maybe they got fired, or they had a big breakup, or they're trying to figure out where to move or where their home is. And they have a lot of trouble feeling into themselves. And there's a lot of emotions that come up in human design. It's kind of like it becomes a mini therapy session, really. And so it's like, okay, well, this is where you tend to take on energy from others, and this is your chart. And it's like, awesome. I teach them how they can tap into their intuition and navigate these things better and know how to make better decisions, and, that are coming from the body and not the mind. But then sometimes they really need help because there's so many layers of conditioning that have come up in their chart where they're open. And so I found that homeopathy, and I use flower essences too, are just so brilliant at basically taking away those layers and
Lifting.
yeah, and kind of going back to like factory settings, or like who you were before all of this, before even the imprinting in the womb. It's like, who are you at the soul level?
Too bad there isn't a button for like restore to factory settings.
I know. There wouldn't be any fun in that, though.
I guess so.
It's what makes life interesting.
Yeah. Wow, that's so awesome. So go forward and share some of the different
yeah, so this is just my little spiel, it's more for people who are kind of on the scientific end. It's like, why is this real? So it's just, this is a little bit explaining about what neutrinos are, which is like a fancy quantum physics term for the energetic particles that we can't perceive that are around us, that are impacting us, which is why we feel things like Mercury retrograde, Saturn return, because these things are around us all the time. It's just that we can't see them with the naked eye, and they have an impact on our energy. So that's why, we can feel it, and we have that imprint 88 days before the energy, what the weather looked like that day, celestially, and then when we're born. And so it's like, I think of it, say that there's a child that's born, March 2020, they're born during the time of COVID, and that is absolutely going to be imprinted on their neurology and affect how they express and how they move through the world and everything about them. And so you can look at
what, for example, I know 2 babies born in March 2020. Mm-hmm. What's your sense of them? What would kind of...
That's a very good question. So there's a lot of, in human design, in astrology, there is such an energy of structural breakdown. So everything that we've relied upon, everything that kind of, this is speaking more to the Western world, everything we've built in America was based on transits that had a lot to do with Capricorn and work, and all of these systems now are kind of getting a gut punch, and they're being completely dismantled by the transits. So that person, that baby, that comes into the world, they're like, they didn't have the time before when things were a little bit more stable. Of course, there was always problems, but now it's just so obvious,
Right.
So they're like made to build the new world. They're here to say, wow, this certainly is not working. We need to build something completely new.
Yes.
And so that wound that they're going to have, also a lot of wounds around, there's Aries wounds, which would be like conflict, war, and identity also is Aries. It's the body, issues around the body, expression, hence the mask, the masking, because you can't see another person's face. So the issues of relating and identity, but they can take that wound and completely transform it, because they'll know they have imprinted that energy of like, this isn't working. We're going to change it. And so it's really hopeful in that way, actually.
Wow. I just had like such an insight of like bringing a human into the world, born on a certain day. That human is carrying the imprint of that celestial quality of, societal change. So like even just parenting a child born at a certain time, that timing can really compel you. Once that child is there, that makes you need to move your house, change your job, start a new career, because that child is holding that energy and you're in it.
Yes.
Time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And it's funny because you can think about that with a child, but I've seen it in clients where they'll get a dog and the same thing will happen. They're taking the energy, the energetic imprint. Dogs have a design too.
Right.
So it actually, kids, pets, whoever is in your life, just amazing catalyst for change. Definitely.
Right. It's so funny. I have two 2-year-old pets in my house. I've got a hedgehog and a chameleon. So they were born in March.
Wow.
And it's so funny because, we've been wanting to get a pet, and the dog that we were going to get, like the whole litter, like died because of some infection. So it was like all that kind of COVID-y energy. And so it's like, and so then like the hedgehog and the chameleon, and I like in my mind, I have the nickname Fear and Anger. Cause like the hedgehog is just pure fear, hiding in her cage, like never wanting to come out, which is so COVID-y. And like,
oh my gosh,
the chameleon is just like, let me do my own thing. Leave me alone. He's like and angry. And it's funny. It is funny how we kind of bring those energies into our home, and they're like just projected from this time and allow us to kind of process that.
So it's interesting, and an interesting exercise to Google the day you were born and what was in the news.
Yes.
And 88 days prior.
Right.
You get a lens into what your mom was feeling.
Important for human design itself as well.
Yeah. So it's fascinating. And that can even give you an interesting extra layer of the person in front of you, just from a homeopathy perspective.
Right.
Even if you don't know human design, it's like, interesting. Yeah. That's what they came into. Yeah. And, for example, it's really interesting is that Pluto kind of defines generations. And so my generation, like the millennials, were born with Pluto in Scorpio. And so it's said that essentially we're reincarnates from World War II times. So it's really interesting how you can even see it from that, from like, you know, past life perspective too, of like, wow, why does this feel familiar, you know, on a weird level? Like I've seen it, you know, clients and people in my life who've had dreams like they've been in World War II or associated with it, and they have no idea why.
That's so interesting because, you know, David in our class is an evolutionary astrologer, and he showed
Oh
me
yeah.
that my Pluto's in Scorpio, and then the Pluto and Mars went conjunct on the day that I found a dead body in the woods. Like, so it's so interesting because
Wow.
yeah, we're just like all of our deepest stuff from not just this life, but from many lives just show up no matter where we are in very
Mm-hmm.
strange ways.
Exactly.
Do you see, you know, there are many styles of astrology out there. Do you integrate other styles with what you do?
Yeah. So my fiance is actually an astrologer. So I'm around astrology all the time. So I think that the two tools honestly work hand in hand perfectly together.
Uh-huh.
And I think that what I was getting at before is like human design can ground the astrology into the body of like, okay, what do I do with this information? So I love karmic astrology, which tells more about past lives. I love all of it. I'm a huge astrology lover.
Awesome. Great.
Yeah, let's see what else is here. Yeah, so what are some of the things that human design can tell you? Why did you incarnate this time? What's kind of the reason that your soul chose to come here this go around? That can be told through things like the incarnation cross. How do you use your energy in a way that makes you feel good, you know, especially in doing client work? How can you sustain client work, or how can you pivot? What are you more apt to do? What's your specialty and talent? How to navigate the mini micro decisions on a daily level and the bigger decisions of life. How do we learn to trust ourselves in our decision making and not let other people's opinions or what's practical get too in the way of that? I find that especially important now because a lot of the people I see are definitely in fear mode. You know, the world does not feel like a safe place to be for so many reasons that seem to keep, you know, piling on every day, right? So it's like, how can you tune into not what's just practical, but what is your unique path? Where should you be in the world?
Right.
Unique gifts and talents. You can also see, like I'd mentioned before, where you take on energy. Also, you can find what kind of environment is suited for you. So are you best in the mountains? Are you best near a shore? Are you valleys and you're really sensitive to noise and the acoustics of your environment? And also where you can be prone to health issues and how to manage them. And we know, you know, from homeopathy, there's always a deeper reason for symptom expression. It's just our soul kind of knocking on our door. Yeah, then I have a little mini thing on the 5 designs, just so people can look up their charts and see, you know, who am I and what does that mean? The 2 sites that I recommend are mybodygraph.com and myhumandesign. Both of those are excellent free resources where you can get your type. I think there's even an app called My Human Design too now, which kind of gives you little pieces of your chart that you can learn right away and integrate.
Yeah.
So these are the 2 most common types, like I had mentioned. And so they really are the builders, the workers, the doers. They really, really love their work. They're the type of people who have trouble taking a day off because they just want to go back to work. Now, big caveat here, you know, big exception here is that this is if they've chose work that truly is, you know, meant for them and they're not just working to work. It's more of like what's it called? Something that they chose purposefully that really resonates with them and their soul.
Mm-hmm.
So they really came here to master not only their work, but also they came here to really know themselves and master themselves through the process. And like I had said before, if they let their guts guide them in their decision-making process, they can stay on that path that was carved out for them, their uniquely divine path. And so there's a reason that things are a yes for some people and a no for others. It's because we're all here for our own unique purpose. And so that kind of helps to give yourself permission to follow your yeses and follow your nos, because it really is for a reason, and it doesn't benefit anybody to say yes to things that are a no at the end of the day. It really just doesn't. It works better for everyone involved if you really tap into that and honor that guidance from your body. So the thing that I see the most commonly in these types is that they're trying to initiate things in their life, and they're met with a lot of resistance. So the weird thing about human design is that there's actually only one energy type that's supposed to initiate or start something. The other types are supposed to kind of wait for things to come to them, and then they respond to it with a yes or a no from their body. So it's like, we're raised to believe you have to go make a name for yourself, go build a life, go do, just do it, and it actually only works for like 10% of people to do things that way. And there's a lot of frustration that comes. And it can actually block the opportunities that are trying to come in for you. So it's really about learning and taking inventory of your current life, seeing what you may be saying yes to that should be a no, or what you're saying no to that could be a yes. Everything, like where you live, what time you wake up, what kind of work you do, the people in your life, just taking inventory of all of that, and knowing that if you notice that there are some things that you're saying yes to that maybe you don't want to, it's okay. And this is a process, it's not like your design and it's like the next day you have to completely change your entire life. It's awareness, and it helps you to say yes or say no and use your intuition better the next time. So I hope that makes sense. And then manifestors. So these are the types that can initiate. And so in history, they were kind of like the kings or the queens. A lot of them are manifestors. The CEOs, the people that are more of the visionaries, but they don't have the energy necessary to really be in the day-to-day work like the generator can, because they have this open. And so they really just initiate action and then oversee the process. So I like to call them like the domino flickers. They set things into motion. And they can have a lot of trouble with feeling restricted by something. So a lot of manifestors that I see, they were kind of not allowed to initiate in childhood just because, they wanted to go out to play, and their mom says, well, no, you can't do that right now. Or they're the kind of types that just want to go off and do their thing without telling anybody. And then their mom's like, where did you go? And they're just like, oh, I just went, to the park. I didn't think I had to tell you. So they're kind of afraid of people telling them what to do and being restricted by somebody. So that makes them super angry. And so a big lesson for manifestors is like knowing how to inform people, and they move quickly. So make sure people are on the same page as you before you go out and initiate action.
Yeah, I sigh with that one. I feel okay, do some of that.
So the next one are projectors. And so I had gone over these types a little bit. So they're about 20% of people. And so they are really here to guide others. I call them the all-seeing guides. They really have this detached, more overview, and they're amazing guides. So I have projector friends that I talk to all the time when I need direction on my life and I can't see it for myself. And they're just so amazing at seeing into you. You know, their aura is very penetrative. And so they can literally feel into you and see where you could be going wrong or seeing where you need to course correct. And they're super, super good at that. And that can be applied to anything in life. So kind of what you were saying, does it limit you? Well, not really, because you can apply this energy to literally anything that, you like.
I have a friend who's an acupuncturist who's just this way. And I think of like acupuncture as that way of just this redirect energy all the time.
Exactly. They know exactly where the pain is.
Right.
They can tap into that.
Right.
And so the thing about this is that they need kind of permission before they're able to see into people, because a lot of times they're like the really well-meaning friend that will give unsolicited advice. And if they're not asked for their advice, it can kind of fall on deaf ears, and then they can get bitter about it. Or why isn't anyone listening to me? I know what they should be doing, but they won't listen. And that's because they have to be open to it. They have to ask for the advice or the guidance. And so that's why a lot of these people do great with client work or consulting work, where it's like the client booked with you. So that's your invitation. You can, guide them in any way you see fit, and they really need all types. I want to mention this. All types really need the right kind of people around them that really see and honor who they are. And it just really shows that we're all here for such a beautiful, specific purpose, and we all operate differently, and that's totally fine. And just to give yourself permission to really lean into what you naturally do anyway, which is what I find when people really get familiar with their design. They find that they were naturally drawn to doing that thing or operating in that way, but they were just telling themselves stories of why they couldn't, basically.
This idea of autoimmunity that is so prevalent and growing in our culture is this over self-criticism, over self-attack. I need to be doing this, or I'm not doing it the right way. And that voice, that inner voice that's just so programmed in our culture. Exactly that, it even though something might feel right to you, you push yourself away from it because you don't allow what is natural to occur.
Yeah.
This is a wonderful way of kind of overcoming that.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Samuel Hahnemann quote, which I'm going to butcher, but it's basically like, a remedy's working because you return to that naturalness.
Right.
And that's what I've seen is that, and another reason why I pair the two is that people will just naturally live their design.
Uh-huh.
If they're really returning their vital force is alive and thriving, they'll just live their design without even knowing it.
Right.
But it's like when you reach difficulties in life that you can kind of look at it and say, no, this is my permission to do it my way and to do it in a way that feels good. I see a lot of people will come to me, for example, because they're an entrepreneur, they're a healer, they're trying to get their business off the ground. And that's where I see, when you start your practice or your business, it's like all of the insecurities and everything that's been buried kind of comes up. You judge yourself on how you're doing or how well you chose the remedy or how many clients you booked or whatever. And it's like, this is a perfect time to see into your design of how to make this so much more effortless and easy for yourself. And you don't have to take the marketing advice, or you don't have to be, what somebody else wants you to be, or you don't have to be on Instagram or whatever,
Right.
You can do it your own way.
Right.
So reflectors, these types are amazing. They're very, very rare. And so they literally are like our report card of how we're doing it as a society, because they're taking in everything on all levels and feeling it. So they're super sensitive to their environment, to the people around them. They're like the canary in the coal mine of like, we're not doing so great, guys. Check in. They're the mirrors. Yes. And they're so tuned into the natural cycles and the planetary rhythms. They do so well emptying out in nature and tuning into their lunar cycle. They actually shouldn't make huge decisions that are life altering before going through a lunar cycle, because the transit is going to go through their entire design in 28 days. and they're going to feel differently about something within that month because of the transit lighting up different parts of their chart temporarily. And so they really need time for clarity and to really feel into things. And what's really cool about human design too, that we don't have time to get into today, but there's another layer of like, okay, how do you further take in information to make proper choices for yourself? Like, for example, I have what's called feeling cognition. And for me, it's like always asking myself, how does that thing make me feel? Does it make me feel alive? Does it make me feel, stressed out? What is it? It's like my feelings for my design are like my divine guidance of what is right and what is wrong. And it's amazing. You spoke about autoimmunity, and in human design, the immune system is in the spleen. So somebody who has the center open, they can have some immune difficulties if they're just not aware of the energies that they're taking on and how to navigate that. But also they can be incredibly intuitive medically. They can feel the illness of others, right, and where they're, sick, where they need help. So our openness is ultimately such a gift. Our whole design is such a gift. So those are the types. If you had any questions about that, just kind of a quick overview of the possibilities of just one layer of the chart.
Do you have like some of those types, like having like certain remedy types in mind? Does that get triggered for you? Or is it really that they're too different? Like they're looking at different levels of reality.
Yeah, it's really, it's like you can't look at one part of the chart without looking at all of it. So because there's only 5 types, it's so hard. I wish I've tried, but it's really just looking at the whole chart as a whole. And
it's funny because I was trying to do it. I was like, oh, is this? And then I was just like, no, like my feeling is this, it's really a very different way of looking at like the human body and how it's flowing with energy.
But the cool thing is that if you know the basics, if you know the types, if you have an understanding of the centers and what it means to have something opened or defined. And then the other layer that I would learn is profile, which is kind of like more information on the archetype that you embodied. And how you deal with relationships, and whether you're somebody who has more of an internal process, or if you're more interpersonal, where you need other people to kind of fulfill your life's role. So those things, when you take those into account, you can start to develop more of a sense of remedies.
I mean, if anything, you can maybe correlate it with the periodic table of elements in the sense that like at the top is where you have in the uranium series, maybe this is like the reflectors, because they're just, they're kind of disintegrated and open. Their boundaries are so open, and they're rare, right? Whereas and then whereas the generators manifest, the generators are more at just the bottom, the work, is the and like that is the majority of elements, that is the majority of people out there. And then like the people who really kind of initiate those projects are kind of maybe more in like silver or lanthanide or something like that. So maybe.
Absolutely. Yes, that I have seen that. And when I was going back to the archetype of, animals and the bird, I've seen projectors do really well in bird remedies to embrace that kind of thing, because, bird remedies tend to be healers as well. And generators who are healers really benefit from lanthanide and bird remedies. And also I've seen reflectors, you mentioned uranium, and it's like, because they're amplifying energy, it can be kind of explosive if it's unhealthy, so kind of the radioactives even come to mind, because going back to like, what are you imprinted with? So where you're open, you're imprinted with today's energy. So how do you feel today or during this cycle of time? There's going to be, a lot more of the radioactive type. Things are falling apart. Society is falling apart. That kind of energy.
Right, right. Wow. And so, are there certain of these 9
Mhm.
centers that are more impacted by actual astrology, or is all of astrology as it's shifting and transits are occurring are affecting the
Mhm.
whole system?
Yeah. So what's cool is that with a human design app, you can kind of get a transit overlay.
Uh-huh.
So it can tell you, what centers are being defined for you based on the transits. And so, say a reflector, you have all these gates to let up. So you still have ways that energy is being channeled through that center consistently. But then say, 4 is active in the transit. So all of a sudden you have a defined head and ajna, and you're really wanting to put your ideas out there, and you're wanting to speak, and you're wanting to write, and you're wanting to teach, and you can take advantage of that energy and know that that center is temporarily available to you, because when it's defined, you just have more access to that energy in a consistent way. Whereas when it's open, there's just so much more range in ways that it can show up for you.
Right.
Especially based on like who you're interacting with, who you're maybe partnering with in business or friendship. But in terms of like impact of transits, reflectors will definitely be the most impacted, but also anyone with the identity center open.
Right.
Um, and so if you have center like identity center open or emotions open, you're an emotional sponge that takes in emotions from others. Spleen, you're taking in somebody's illness or sickness. I found that plants work really well for these too, because just the more sensitivity is there. These are the types that I often find have like a lot of food allergies and sensitivities, if they're like, either if their spleen is open or if it's being used in an unhealthy way. Because the thing is that even if you have a center filled in or defined, you can still be expressing the lower range of that energy. And it's usually the unhealthy expression is usually triggered by where you're open. So it's kind of like this cascading effect where
Right.
it's like, oh, I'm taking on, I don't know when enough is enough. I'm burnt out in my sacral. So all of a sudden it's triggering my spleen, which may be defined, but now my immune system's kind of going bonkers. You see what I'm saying?
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it feels almost like these personality types are like a major oversimplification because of all the variety and complexity that you can kind of get to with all of
Yes.
so it's almost like it's the calling card, but it's
Yeah.
just
It's like your sun sign.
exactly
Mhm.
right. And the sun sign is wonderful, but yes, it's just a small aspect of who we are.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think the real, what is really nice is that all you really need is one piece of information, which is the birth time to
Mhm.
achieve this. With homeopathy, we have a much more kind of nebulous, how do we even find the information that we need to find? And it's, it can be like finding a needle in a haystack,
Exactly. Exactly. And it's like, I think that that's why, I just, it's so cool to know these tools, because it kind of gives you a little bit of a map to work off of. Say you have a really, a client that just doesn't really have access to their internal world. They're not used to expressing that. And so it's really hard to get in there, and it's really hard to understand, what do they need? What's their energetic imprint? It's like, okay, well, this is something you can kind of work on, even as like, I've used it where it's like, so tell me about your relationship to work, or,
and do you do it for
so
kids too? Like it could show you
yeah,
how to
I
educate
do it for
a child.
families a lot.
Oh,
So they know
interesting.
how it's like this whole energy network where it's like, how is it operating? It's like its own energy system that takes on a life of its own with the people in the house.
Oh,
And
I want to make an appointment with you. Yeah, that would be really
yeah,
fun.
I love it. It's so cool. And you'll really see why your kids are so drastically different, and why they
Right.
one wants to take a nap and one doesn't want to take a nap, and one is this and one is, it's like, it's so fascinating.
Right.
And I also just like it because a lot of times when people are coming in for homeopathy, it's like they're really having to go back through their history, and it opens up a lot. It opens up kind of a can of worms of like this introspective process that maybe they've never embarked on. And so this can kind of be like a grounding tool to give them of like, hey, maybe explore this, and see what it feels like for you. See, it brings a conscious awareness to maybe some things about yourself that you've never thought about, or you've taken for granted, or you didn't even realize. And you can kind of have your energy mirrored back to you in a way where it's like, you can reflect on it, which.
And sometimes with homeopathy, we get to the point where we're so focused on pathology and what's negative about our lives and all of the traumas. And this is a way that you can kind of empower somebody with their natural gifts as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's a reminder. It's so much of what I see is that people come and they're completely taking their gifts for granted. They think everybody is gifted in that, or it's not a big deal that they're gifted in that. And once they see that that's actually unique to them, it's like it kind of empowers them to utilize it and also see what's lying beneath the surface unconsciously that they can tap into for gifts.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about or share? Or we kind of covered the basics.
Let me see. I did want to go over these really quick because it's kind of like a quick, your body is giving you a message that maybe you're off track. So if you're a generator or a manifesting generator, your kind of check engine light is like feeling frustrated a lot. Frustration, like, oh, I just can't get anywhere. I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. Versus if you're on track, you're going to feel really satisfied by the work that you do. Like, nobody wants to always show up for something every day. There's times, but it's like when you do something and it just brings a great sense of satisfaction. Like, wow, I really, really repertorize that super well. And I just feel so satisfied.
Feel like it fits with like the Ferrum series, because the Ferrum series has that like a good day's work, or like that was a good meal, or like
exactly. Yes, exactly. Manifestors, they're going to feel angry if they're off track, and it's going to build and maybe be explosive. They're the types of people who punch a hole in the wall, or like have to break a dish in the back, or scream into a pillow when things build up, versus they'll feel a sense of peace with what is. Even if things aren't perfect, they feel at peace.
Yeah.
Projectors, they really want to be seen for their unique gifts. So they're going to feel bitter if people aren't seeing them for who they are, or if they're not hearing them, or if they're not able to guide in the way that they want, they're going to feel bitter. Versus success for them is like getting those invitations, getting invited to guide, and, people seeing them for who they are, and recognizing them.
Yeah. So it's a kind of like an internalness, like just like brooding or something like that.
Yeah. It's like, why do I even bother?
That is the lanthanide quality, maybe.
Yeah. It's like, why do I even bother? Nobody ever listens to me.
Right.
Nobody's ever going to ask me what I think,
Right.
And then reflectors, because they're taking in everything from the world, they're born and they're like, well, this is a disappointment. Everything's wrong. What the heck? Like I don't like this energy. Versus like being surprised by life, surprised by all the beautiful things that life brings you. How do you feel today? Tapping into that, tapping into the good in life, the good in the world, reminding yourself of that and the beauty by grounding yourself in nature, getting in tune with natural rhythms.
Right. So
those are that. And yeah, this is just where to find me.
Oh, you've got a podcast.
I'm the same name on everything. And I give readings, and I also teach human design for healers. So if they want to integrate it into their practice, I help them do that on a way that's, you don't have to be a human design reader level.
Oh, fun. Well,
yeah,
I would love to take that once I complete my class.
I know, there's always so much to learn and so many amazing things.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's a wonderful time for us to be sharing and kind of overlapping these modalities. And, there's so many, I'm just learning about so much. There's a a company in my town that makes potions out of astrological elections. So certain.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, you bring that time into your, so this is Saturn in Capricorn.
So like, is it where they use a telescope and they kind of capture that?
Yes.
Energy?
And they only make it at that exact time. And then whatever batch they make, you can never repeat it again because it's only made at that time.
That's so cool.
And so I'm experimenting with that and learning a lot. There's so much to learn.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I just I encourage everyone just to explore it. I have a lot of free resources with my podcast has free resources, my Instagram website. I just love spreading the word about human design. I think it's so powerful. And so
thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. And maybe we can have a part 2.
I would love to. Yeah, anytime.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.